Hey, so as some of you may know, I've covered the Vitruvian Trainer Plus pretty extensively on this channel, and that includes an in-depth review, a beginner's guide, as well as updates and interviews with coaches, but I still tend to get a lot of questions about Vitruvian Trainer Plus. Now, some of them I've covered in pieces of these various videos, but I can understand that it can be hard to find them, especially if you just want to know a few things. So what I did is, for the people who asked me questions, and that includes coworkers, people who had emailed me, I asked them to put together an entire list of questions that they would want to know about Vitruvian. And so I took a lot of those questions and put them down here so I can go through sort of a Q&A and hopefully answer many of the questions that you may want to know. So without wasting your time, let's go ahead and start with the first question, which is, how does it feel when compared to lifting with free weights? And to be quite honest, it both feels similar and also different. It feels like you are lifting weights in a traditional sense, but you don't get any of the momentum that you tend to get with lifting weights. And that's a really hard thing to describe unless you've been lifting weights for a long, long time. It's not something that I feel feels any worse or any better necessarily, just a little bit different. And of course, as I mentioned before, the weights on Vitruvian Trainer Plus do feel heavier because of this lack of momentum than traditional weights. So if you're lifting 100 pounds on the Vitruvian Trainer, that's going to feel a bit heavier than 100 pounds like on a barbell. Now, that leads into the second question, which is, can you realistically get the same results with Vitruvian Trainer as you could from traditional weightlifting? And I think that's a pretty easy answer. I think the answer is yes, definitely. There's really not much that you could do with a traditional barbell and dumbbell setup that you can't do with the Vitruvian Trainer. Of course, it's going to feel a little bit different, but I think in terms of actual results, you're going to be able to get at least as good results with the Vitruvian Trainer as you could with traditional weights. And you might even be able to get better results just because you do have additional options like eccentric work. And I know in my case, I don't really have dumbbells that go past 50 pounds. And so I can do much heavier single arm work with the Vitruvian Trainer than I could otherwise. Question number 3 is, how are the accessories and do you suggest the Pro Kit? So a Vitruvian Trainer comes with a variety of accessories when you buy it, but there is also an additional Pro Kit. And what comes in each has changed a little bit. And while I do have the Pro Kit, I actually don't have the newest Pro Kit because some of the accessories have been updated over the past year or so, though I have tested and I made a video about the new updated kit, so I know how it feels. And the accessories in general feel great to use. I have a ton of accessories for other types of strength devices, and I feel like Vitruvian's accessories are as high quality as any I have used. The one complaint that I think many people have, and that I have as well to a smaller degree, is the bench. Now, my bench is the older bench, but there is a new bench design that comes with the Pro Kit that's even nicer. But the problem with both is that it is a bit low to the ground, which some people find not as comfortable. And like I said, it's not a huge deal for me, though I would say that a higher bench would probably be preferable. And would I suggest the Pro Kit? I think if you're using this as your primary strength device and you do want that bench, then I definitely think it's worth investing into. But if you're not really interested in doing things with the bench, then it may not be quite as good of a deal. Okay, so next question is, how do you deal with not having horizontal pulling or lat pull downs? And this is a big question I think a lot of people have because you do pull the cables from the ground, which means you don't have options to, have a horizontal pull or, pulling from above. And again, while that may be a reasonable worry, to be honest, in like the 20 plus years of strength training that I've done, only like 1 or 2 years I've had equipment that even allowed me to do stuff like that. And I never really used it very often. And I get that they are nice to have in some cases, but for me, I've just never really used them to any degree that I've ever been concerned about not having them. But if you are concerned about not having like a lat pull down, then unfortunately just Vitruvian doesn't have that option. And that kind of leads into this next question, which goes, how does it compare with other digital weight options? And so right now there are quite a few. There's like Tonal, there is Speedience, there is a new one from Echelon that I haven't really tested out. And there's some other smaller indie companies that have different types of products that are somewhat similar in a way. Other options are in some cases reasonable to look at. And I do plan on making a much more in-depth video on Speedience versus Vitruvian because I think that requires a more in-depth look in some cases. But I would say, at least for guys, if you ever plan on lifting like more than beginner level weights, over 200 pounds, then really Vitruvian is the only viable option because most other products have a max capacity of 200 pounds of digital loading, whereas the Vitruvian Trainer has over 400 pounds. So there's a big difference in what you can really get out of it. And even for women, like I've had women in their 50s who had never lifted before, and they were eventually lifting well over 200 pounds for movements like deadlifts. And even in their case, they would have pretty much maxed out for most other machines. So you really have to consider what you want out of the machine. And I think for a lot of cases, especially for men that are going to be lifting over 200 pounds, like you might want to be comparing the Vitruvian Trainer to other free weight options, but probably not other digital loading options. Next up is how do lifting modes work and which lifting mode do you use most often? So Vitruvian Trainer has, I think, 4 lifting modes, maybe 5. I know they're coming up with a new one this year, I think. And the lifting modes are like eccentric or pump or like traditional or old school mode. And to be honest, I just usually use old school mode, which means that the weight feels like a weight kind of should. If it was a real weight, it stays consistent on the way up and on the way down. I typically use that mostly because I know what the effect is going to be on me and I know how to progress that. And so I really like it. But the other modes have legitimate use cases that could be way more valuable to some people. For example, I know the pump mode, it only goes up to the max weight that you select if you're moving quick enough. And I think that's a really good option for like beginner lifters who aren't sure what to lift because they can add more and more weight and it won't go up in weight if they're not really able to move fast enough to lift it like they would with traditional weights. So it's a really nice way for somebody who doesn't want to record their weights or really worry about that stuff to get in a good workout that's going to allow them to lift more towards what their capacity really is. Now, the next question is Vitruvian a smart device? As in, does it remember like which weights you've done in the past and adjust workouts in the future? And I believe it does a little bit. So if you have a Vitruvian membership, it will track all of your workouts and all of the weights you use for the various movements. And if you've done a workout before, it'll know what you did with that workout. And there's a little slider. So what it does is it kind of predicts like what your max weight is for all the various movements that you've done based on your history. And then when you use a slider, when you start a workout, you can kind of adjust all of the suggested weights for all of the movements based on like how you're feeling that day. Like if you want to bump it up above what they suggest or below what they suggest based on your previous lifts. So it does have some smart functionality that gets adjusted as you lift more with Vitruvian. That said, I don't really use a lot of that because I just, like I said, I'm old school. I just like knowing exactly what I'm going to be lifting that day and then maybe adding a few more pounds the next week and kind of progressing like that. But the smart options where it has suggestions like that are definitely there. Next up is how many profiles can I have for my family members? Can each of them have their own profile on Vitruvian? So yes, anybody can lift with a Vitruvian, whether or not you have a membership. But if you do have a membership, you can share that with as many people in your household as you want, and they can each have their own profile because you can always just set up another profile. You just can't track and use all the special membership related features for a particular machine if that machine doesn't have a membership for it. But they can still use that machine whether or not anybody has a membership as well. So yes, everybody in your family or household can have a profile and use it with the Vitruvian Trainer. The next question was, how long do you expect Vitruvian to last before it breaks down? And just based off of my usage over the past year and a half, 2 years, it seems perfectly fine. I would say the one thing that will probably break down maybe in like 5 years is like the cables, but I saw the replacement for that is like $50 or $60. And you can kind of easily replace the cable yourself. So that's really not a big deal. If the cable does indeed break, I haven't had any sign of that. It's just what I assume would be the first thing to break down based on how this machine works. But I would say as long as you're taking care of it, then I would expect the Vitruvian Trainer to last 10 or more years. The hardware seems very solid and it seems like it's holding up very well. The next question is, what are the classes and programs like on Vitruvian? So it's kind of like most connected fitness products where there are classes and programs that you can take and you follow along to a coach and you work out while the coach is working out and giving cues and all of that. What's also nice and something that I prefer is if I'm going to be taking a class, because I personally don't need to be watching the coaches while I lift and do that stuff. You can turn like any class into just like a follow along yourself class where you can control the rests and you can just go through it at your own pace. So that's what I typically do, but there are a lot of classes and new classes and programs being added pretty consistently. Next question is, how do I personally use Vitruvian? So the way I use Vitruvian is probably different than most people just because I have been lifting for so long. I have a good idea about what I want to do. So what I typically do is I just know like the movements that I'll be doing, and I'll just select the movement individually. I'll do all of my sets and stuff on that particular movement, and then I'll choose another movement that I wanted to do, and I'll do that. I just prefer doing it that way. So I don't even put the workout together necessarily like through the custom workouts or anything. I just pick and choose one movement at a time, and I do my workouts that way. Now, the next question is, if you had to choose, would you pick a Vitruvian trainer, or would you choose that new all-in-one trainer that you recently reviewed in your garage? So that's referring, I think, to the Force 15 all-in-one trainer that I have recently installed and reviewed in my garage. And I have that next to the Vitruvian. Now, first off, there is a big price difference between the two. I know the Vitruvian's not super low priced, but the all-in-one trainer is like $6,000. So it is almost twice as expensive. And even still, even that thing has cables and barbells and pretty much everything you could ever want. I actually use Vitruvian trainer more often at home. And one of the biggest reasons is just ease. Like, I don't have to pull out the barbell. I don't have to pull out stuff. I just go over there, open the app, throw on a few weights with the app, and, just start warming up with the movement that I want to do. And I can just jump right into it so easily. So there's so little friction from me going from work to getting in a quick strength workout that I really do find myself using Vitruvian much more often. And if space was an issue, like if I didn't have a full garage dedicated as a garage gym, then I absolutely would use a Vitruvian trainer way more, because there's no way I'd be able to fit the all-in-one trainer, in my home. I think for a lot of people without the room, Vitruvian makes sense. And even if you have room like I do, I still find myself using it more often. Next question is, what would you like to see improved or added with Vitruvian? So for me, I think the hardware is kind of perfect as it is. It's very simple. It's easy to use. I can add as much or little weight as I want. So I have no issues with the hardware. I have not really issues with the accessories either. I think they're good as is, and I don't have any complaints. The only thing that I wish Vitruvian would improve on is their app. I think currently it's just a bit cumbersome. I wish when I picked up a movement that, I didn't have to like slide up and down to be able to adjust the weights as much. I wish it was designed just a little cleaner so I can more easily just adjust the weight and start the set without having to deal with a bunch of nonsense. I also wish, as somebody who just picks a movement, that you could pick a movement, do a set, then pick another movement, do a set, and then I wish there was a button that let you go back to your previous movement like right away. And that way you could more easily do supersets. And I know you can do that with like custom workouts, but again, I don't really put together the custom workouts too often. And I know you can do that with their free mode as well, but in free mode, it doesn't track your workout history for each of the lifts because it's just like do whatever you want. So those would be the two things that I personally would want most, is just like a better, easier, and faster to use UI and the ability to do quick supersets with two different movements that you select. Next up is, what do you think about the company? I'm a little hesitant to pay a lot for a product like this if the company may not be around to support it down the road. And I think that's completely fair. It's one of the reasons I suggest people don't look too much into like Tonal, just because I don't know much about the health of that company, and it looks very worrying to me as somebody who covers connected fitness on a daily basis. But for Vitruvian, as far as I've been able to tell, it seems like they're doing very good. They've continued to grow year after year. I know right now, if you try to purchase a Vitruvian, there's like a long wait, like 4 to 8 weeks to get shipped to you. So I know that there's a lot of demand for this, and just using it, I know why there's such demand for it, because of what I've said before of its space efficiency, how much weight you can use with it. And again, there's a reason why so many athletes, you see like legitimate athletes, are using it, because it is able to do legitimate strength training, at home or on the road. So I think it's just going to continue to grow in popularity. And it's one of the few companies in connected fitness that I'm actually not worried about. Next question is Vitruvian worth it without the membership? And I would say yes. Like if you're like me personally, and if you just choose movements a la carte, then you're perfectly fine. I know some people complain that, there wasn't like a free workout mode with the membership where you could just do whatever you want without having to pick the movements. But realistically, like, you can do that with any movement. So like before free lift mode was even a thing, what I would do is I just chose like a movement that I knew I would never be interested in doing. I forgot what it was. And then I would just mix up the movements that I would do under that movement, because Vitruvian is not so smart that it knows that you're not doing that movement. You know, every set that you do, it asks you to do the full range of motion that you're going to be doing for that set for 3 reps, so it can kind of recalibrate. And so you can pretty much do any movement you want on any movements you select. So I would suggest, if you aren't paying for a membership and you want a free lift mode, just choose a movement that you never do and free lift away. Now, the next question is the Lifespan membership worth the money? So Vitruvian is one of the few companies that offers a Lifespan membership for it versus having to pay month to month or yearly. And the price for that, I believe, is a little over $1,000 for the lifespan of the Vitruvian trainer. And I would suggest getting it if you're going to be getting the subscription. So I don't know how many months it comes with you when you first buy it, but I would use those free months to get an assessment of, are you actually using the membership? And if you are using the membership, getting the lifespan is a really, really good deal, and it'll save you a lot of money long term. And I don't know if they're going to be offering that forever. Like, I know recently in an AMA, the CEO mentioned he may or may not be keeping the lifespan membership. So that's kind of a tell to me that, like, if you do want to get the lifespan membership, you should probably get it pretty quickly. I wouldn't wait for it, because there's a reason why most connected fitness companies don't offer that. And that's because it's a lot more profitable for them not to. Now, the next question I have is, how safe is Vitruvian? Now, this is something I've covered in pretty much every video. It's very safe. The weight will turn off if you can't get up. I've never been in a situation where the weight all of a sudden turned on or did something weird. So yeah, I would say Vitruvian is definitely one of the safest ways you could lift. Probably as safe or safer than just traditional free weights. Definitely safer than just traditional barbells because of the ability for it to unload so quickly. Next question is, what do you think the future of Vitruvian looks like? Features or new versions? I don't see the Vitruvian trainer, like the hardware, it changing anytime in the near future. I know that they've developed it so simply. It's just, you know, a platform that if they do add things to, they could build around it. The product itself is already very small. It already has 400 plus pounds of capacity. So I don't think realistically there's any need or desire for them to upgrade that anytime soon. As far as features, yeah, I think they're going to be adding lots of new features down the road. I know they're already working on tons of stuff with their app this year, and I would assume that upgrades to the app or maybe possibly new accessories down the road, that's kind of how they'll develop new stuff for the future. Now, the next question is Vitruvian good for weight loss? Yes, of course. Vitruvian is just another way to strength train. In my opinion, is that strength training is really ideal for weight or fat loss. And cardio, I think cardio and conditioning is very important to your health and your longevity and your overall, you know, how you feel. But I don't really suggest doing a ton of cardio or conditioning if you're trying to lose fat. I think strength training is much more effective. And so, yes, I think Vitruvian is good and effective for weight loss. Next question is, could you train for CrossFit with Vitruvian? And I would say kind of. Like, CrossFit is a sport, and that sport includes using barbells with a wide variety of movements, including dynamic movements that you can't do with Vitruvian, like, you know, cleans and snatches and so forth. So can you get stronger with Vitruvian and then have that apply over to CrossFit? Definitely. But you couldn't just like replace a barbell with a Vitruvian only and expect to do good, because that's like, you know, trying to play baseball but getting rid of the ball and just like getting stronger at throwing like things that are kind of like a ball. Like, if you're going to play a sport, you got to practice with the tools of the sport. Now, the last question is, would Vitruvian be good for like a high school kid training for sports? And yes, Vitruvian, I think, would be huge in high school sports specifically, because like I know a lot of sports teams that just don't have the space to have a bunch of squat racks and barbells and everything for their whole team. And so they're limited on space. So I think programs bringing Vitruvians on for kids in high school would be really good. But even if that wasn't the case, like if I was in high school and I was considering getting like a barbell set type of thing or the Vitruvian, and I could afford the Vitruvian as a high school kid, then I'd probably go for that. And I think that's probably the better way to go because, again, I think it's safer, especially for beginner lifters, than traditional weights. And as a high school kid, you're probably not lifting that safely, especially if you're not lifting with a coach with you. And you can definitely build as much strength or get as strong as you could with traditional weights. So I think it would be perfect for a high school kid. Anyways, that's all the questions that I have here. But if you have any questions for me about Vitruvian, I'd love to help answer you in the comments below. As always, this is Colin Jenkins with Connect the Watts. Appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next time.